Hey everybody, by a waterfall, I'm calling you hoo 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 so we can get into the classic 1933 Busby Berkeley musical, Footlight Parade, starring James Cagney, Joan Blondell, Ruby Keeler, and Dick Powell. Now, Chester Kent, as played by James Cagney, has been producing musical shows on the stage, but with the advent of talking pictures, he finds audiences really don't want to see them. After his producing partner show him a prologue, which is a short little stage show shown in between movies, and he stops at a chain drugstore for some aspirin, he gets the idea that producing prologues for many theaters in the chain store idea will be cheaper than producing for one, and his partners like the idea. Their studio becomes a success, but Chester's partners have no trouble cheating him out of the profits, while he is continually trying to come up with ideas for prologues, especially when the competition is stealing his ideas through spies in the company. Now, his secretary, Nan Prescott, Joan Blondell, is secretly in love with him and does what she can to help get him out of trouble. Now, they're given the opportunity to sign with Apollinaris, as played by Paul Porcassi, who would use the prologues in many of his theaters. But they have to come up with 3 different prologues to test on audiences in a very short time before he will sign. Now, following the success of both 42nd Street and Gold Diggers of 1933, Footlight Parade was put into production. James Cagney, who had been a song and dance man on the stage but had quickly become typecast as a gangster in the movies after his role in The Public Enemy, campaigned hard to get a role in this movie after seeing the success of the previous films. Obviously, he got the part, and he was teamed up with his then frequent co-star Joan Blondell, a pairing that had worked to get since they both came to Hollywood a few years earlier to do Sinner's Holiday, which they had done on Broadway. Now, of course, continuing on from the previous 2 films on screen were Ruby Keeler, Dick Powell, and Guy Kibbe, and off-screen 42nd Street director Lloyd Bacon returned. Of course, Busby Berkeley himself returned, trying to figure out how to top the previous films. Now, personally, I consider this movie the best of the Busby Berkeley movies from the 30s for 2 reasons: James Cagney and the song By a Waterfall. By a Waterfall was Berkeley's big number for this film, making use of an 80 by 40 foot swimming pool and lighting that helped emphasize some of the various formations that the swimmers do. Of course, the song itself is a lot of fun and quite catchy too. And getting to see another James Cagney musical is just as fun. Here we get to see his style of dancing, as opposed to when he was trying to dance like the real George M. Cohan in Yankee Doodle Dandy a decade later. Honestly, my biggest complaint with this movie is that we don't get to see enough of him dancing. He mainly does most of his dancing to demonstrate what he wants with some of the different prologues, and his only musical number is the final Shanghai Lil, which personally I would say is probably the second best song in the movie. But he dances with the Ruby Keeler for about a minute in that song, and is otherwise doing some of the formations choreographed by Busby Berkeley. Word of warning, though, is Ruby Keeler is made up to look a bit more Chinese for that number. But for the most part, I would say that the movie is mostly a comedy more than a musical, as there's maybe 1 song before the final half hour, I think it is. And that final half hour is almost entirely comprised of the 3 big musical numbers. But overall, a very fun movie and highly recommended. Of course, as the pre-code, there are enough elements in this movie that there's a little room for debate about how kid-friendly it is, but adults should definitely be able to enjoy this movie and at least try it out before or sticking it on in front of your kids anyways. The movie is available on Blu-ray from Warner Archive Collection. Regarding the transfer to this new release, it looks fantastic. Seriously, I don't know what else to say, as the team at Warner Archive has done their usual phenomenal work here, and I only hope it sells well enough for them to work on the rest of the Busby Berkeley films, not to mention some of their other 30s musicals. But highly recommended here, and the movie is 1 hour and 43 minutes in length. Well, that's all I have to say on this one, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you'll be back for more.